We can hire 3 junior engineers for your salary, he said with a smug little smile. Nothing personal, Felix. It's just numbers. He really thought that made it better. I sat across from Colin Mace, Meridian's brand new CTO. 6 months in the company, armed with a shiny resume and a mouthful of buzzwords. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I just looked at him and said, "Got it. My name is Felix Carr, 57 years old. For 20 years, I built every inch of Meridian's core infrastructure. The servers, the security layers, the failover systems, the architecture that kept everything running when no one else knew why it worked. And now, I was being traded in. Like an old part in a machine someone no longer cared to understand." Colin didn't look me in the eye as he slid a severance packet across the glass table. 2 months' pay, plus an used vacation. We appreciate everything you've done. Appreciate. Funny how that word shows up only when they're done with you. I didn't say a word. Didn't ask why. Didn't beg. I just nodded, took the envelope, and asked, "That's all you've got to say?" He looked up, a little surprised. Like he was expecting me to blow up. Maybe yell. Maybe threaten to sue. But I just gave him a calm look. And said, "Do you know what happens when you pull the plug on a machine you don't understand?" He didn't answer. I stood up. "You'll find out." I left the building without looking back. No one shook my hand. No one said goodbye. Most people just looked down at their keyboards as I walked past. As if making eye contact might get them fired too. In the parking lot, I put 20 years of my life into a single cardboard box. Got into my truck. Drove home. No music. No thoughts. Just the sound of rain on the windshield. Like time falling in slow motion. That night, I sat on my porch with a glass of bourbon in my hand, watching the fog roll across Lake Champlain. My wife, Rachel, sat beside me. She didn't ask what happened. She already knew. "They'll realize what they've done," she said. I nodded. I'm counting on it. Because what they never bothered to learn was this. I didn't just write code. I built the foundation. And when you tear out the foundation, you better pray the walls don't come down with it. I got home just as the sky turned that pale, steel gray that only happens right before a storm. I dropped the box in my home office, walked out to the back deck, and sat in silence. A bourbon in one hand, the other resting on the wooden arm of the chair I built with my father, years ago. The lake stretched out in front of me like a mirror. Still. Cold. Honest. Rachel came out with a blanket around her shoulders, sat beside me without saying a word. She didn't have to. After a while, she spoke, quietly. We always think people will recognize our worth. But sometimes, they don't know how to look. I nodded, eyes still on the water. My mind was somewhere else. Back in time. I remembered the first day I walked into Meridian. Back when it was a tiny office with 4 people and a barely working router. No cloud. No redundancy. No strategy. Just chaos. And then they brought me in. Build us something solid, the founder said. So I did. Bit by bit. Year after year. Late nights. Early mornings. Crises no one else saw because I handled them before they exploded. I wasn't just patching systems. I was laying bricks. And then came the shift. The founder retired. The new leadership came in with words like optimization, cost efficiency, and disruption. They stopped listening to me. Said documentation was too expensive. Said training wasn't urgent. Said the custom infrastructure I built was too reliant on one person. Funny. That one person kept their company alive for 2 decades. Rachel took a sip of her tea and looked at me. So, what now? I stared into the dark. I'm not sure, I said. But I do know this. They're about to find out what happens when you remove the one person who actually knew how everything worked. She didn't smile. She didn't say anything. Just reached out and squeezed my hand. And in that moment, I wasn't angry. I was ready. Because when the people who never valued you start to realize they're in over their heads, that's not your breakdown. That's your opening. 3 days after I walked out of Meridian for the last time, my phone rang. I was in the kitchen, making coffee. Caller ID, Marla, HR. I let it ring. Straight to voicemail. Hi Felix, hope you're doing well. We're having a few minor glitches with the employee login system and access controls. No one seems to understand the logic behind the security layers you implemented. If you're available for a brief consultation, we're open to discussing a fee arrangement. Delete. No response. That afternoon, Colin called. His voice was different now. Less smug, more rattled. Felix, hey. Look, the payment portal isn't working. Some tenants can't process their rent. The team's, having trouble understanding parts of the architecture. If you could spare just an hour. I hung up halfway through the voicemail. That evening, a text popped up on my phone. Caleb, the young database admin I had trained from scratch. Felix. Everything's breaking. 500 errors across the board. No one knows what's happening. Colin's losing it. I stared at the message for a while. Not out of spite, but because I'd seen this coming. I had written reports. I had warned them, again and again, what could happen if no one maintained the system properly, if they refused to invest in documentation. They ignored me. They called it over-engineering. Now, they were standing in a burning house, asking where the water pipes were. That night, I sat on the floor of my home office, surrounded by old architectural diagrams, backups, handwritten notes I hadn't looked at in years. Rachel walked in. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Looking at what I left behind," I said. "Trying to decide if anything's worth salvaging." She sat down beside me. "They're going to keep calling." I nodded. "Yeah. But next time, they won't be asking." She looked at me with quiet concern. "You're still so calm. After everything." I sighed. "I'm not calm," I said. "I'm just done playing nice." The next morning, another call. This time, Sophie, head of operations. Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. "Felix, the maintenance request system has gone down. Tenants can't submit tickets. Our entire scheduling board is blank. Customers are furious. Please." Colin authorized me to ask, "How much would it cost to bring you back for a consultation?" I picked up the phone. Not to agree. Just to ask. "How much are you offering? How much are you offering?" I asked the question flatly, with no emotion. On the other end of the line, Sophie paused, then replied carefully. $300 an hour. Minimum 4-hour blocks. That's the max finance can approve without going to the board. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just hung up. That evening, I sat in my home office under the dim light of a single desk lamp, surrounded by the ghosts of the system I'd built. Diagrams, printouts, backups, the blueprint of 20 years of work. Rachel stepped in with 2 mugs of tea. "I'm guessing they called again," she said. I nodded. "This time with money." She smirked. "Finally realizing your value?" I shook my head. "They don't value me. They're just scared of what happens without me." I leaned back in my chair. "You know what hurts the most?" I asked. She waited. "It's not getting fired. It's knowing I warned them. I tried to build things the right way. Tried to leave something clean. Scalable. Resilient. But they want it fast and cheap. Now they want me to clean it up, because they're bleeding. The next morning, I opened my inbox and saw something unexpected. An email from Nathan Wells, CTO at Oryx Properties, a direct competitor of Meridian. Felix, I heard you're no longer with Meridian. We've been following your work for a while. Oryx is planning a full rebuild of our core infrastructure, and we'd like to talk. No legacy baggage. No politics. Just a fresh start. Coffee this week? I leaned back in my chair. There it was. A door that didn't lead backward. That evening, Colin called again. His voice sounded like a man trying not to drown. Felix, listen. Everything's falling apart. Payment portal, scheduling systems, backups, nothing's syncing right. Our consulting firm can't make sense of your code. It's layered. I smiled faintly. It's secure. That's what it is. He exhaled heavily. We need you. Desperately. Name your rate. The board already approved emergency funds. I stared at the email from Nathan still open on my screen. I picked up the phone again. Sorry, Colin. I've accepted another offer. We can beat it. It's not about money anymore. It's about trust. And you lost at the moment you thought 3 juniors could replace experience. And I ended the call. The contract from Oryx was clear, respectful, and generous. Not just about fixing things, but about building something new. The right way, from the ground up. Rachel saw the look in my eyes when I signed it. So, you're in? I nodded. This time, I'm not patching someone else's mess. I'm building something they'll never be able to tear down. Week 1 at Oryx Properties. No backhanded compliments. No patronizing looks. Just respect. Nathan Wells introduced me on day 1 to the entire tech division as the architect of stability. Not a stopgap. Not a legacy holdover. A builder. We don't just want your systems, he said, we want your mindset. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was no longer defending my value. I was being trusted to define it. Meanwhile, Meridian was burning. Every day, new messages came in from Caleb, the young admin still hanging on. Database crashed. No working backups. Biggest client threatening to leave. Board called emergency session. Colin's on the ropes. Wednesday, 7:43 a.m. Call from Colin. I almost ignored it. But something made me pick up. Felix, I know you're busy. I won't waste your time. But you need to see this. It's worse than you think. There's something I found, and you deserve to know. Reluctantly, I agreed to meet. I stepped into Meridian's headquarters like a ghost walking through the ruins of his own house. The once sleek office now looked like a tech graveyard. Junior devs shouting over one another, support agents overwhelmed by screaming customers, monitors flashing red. Colin pulled me into a side room. His face, once polished and smug, was now pale, sleepless, defeated. He opened his laptop and showed me a chain of emails. Recovered internal messages from months ago. Plan, phase out Felix. March timeline. Board push, replace legacy staff. Report projected savings, $1.4 million per year. Key risk, Felix's system is too custom. Proceed anyway. All signed, Colin Mace. I stared at the screen. You plan to fire me before we even met? He looked down. I was under pressure. The equity firm wanted to trim headcount. You seemed hard to replace. I stood there in silence. Then I said, and now? He didn't even try to hide it. We've lost control. The system is bleeding out. And Oryx. Oryx is negotiating to buy us. I blinked. What? He nodded. Nathan Wells is working on a takeover. And the board wants to know, if it goes through, would you be willing to come back? Help, fix it? Later that night, back at Oryx, Nathan called me into his office. "We're finalizing the acquisition," he said, "and we want you to lead the tech integration." I stared at him. "You want me to rebuild the house that burned me down?" "No," Nathan said. "We want you to decide what's worth saving and tear the rest down." Felix Carr, the man they discarded, now had the chance to rebuild everything on his own terms. Only one question remained. Would I rebuild it or let it fall for good? I stayed up all night thinking. On my desk sat two folders. One filled with the wreckage of Meridian's infrastructure, corrupted backups, fragile architecture, systems duct taped together by desperation. The other? My new designs at Oryx, clean, modular, scalable, built to last. Rachel sat across from me, quiet, watching. "This isn't just a tech problem, is it?" she asked. "No," I said. "It's not. It's personal?" "Not anymore. It's bigger than that. I'm not doing this to save Meridian. I'm doing it for the engineers still stuck there. For the clients who are suffering because a few suits decided experience was too expensive." She gave me a soft smile. "So, you're going back?" I nodded. "Not to fix what they broke. To build what they never could." 1 week later, the acquisition was finalized. Oryx bought Meridian for just 27% of its original valuation. Every executive involved in my termination was gone. I was now the Chief Systems Integration Officer, with full authority to redesign everything. No politics. No red tape. Just mission clarity. On day one, I walked through Meridian's old headquarters. Same hallways. Different energy. Some people looked away. Some offered nervous smiles. But a few, like Caleb, stood tall, their eyes filled with hope. "You came back," he said. "Not to return," I answered. "To rebuild." I gathered the entire tech team. On the screen behind me, I displayed 2 lines. "We're not patching. We're rebuilding. And this time, we do it right." I walked the room slowly, letting the weight of the words sink in. No more shortcuts. No more heroes writing undocumented magic. We build systems that speak for themselves, that anyone can understand, maintain, and trust. No one clapped. They didn't need to. They just nodded because they knew. The era of firefighting was over. The era of foundations had begun. 4 weeks later, the first phase of the rebuild went live. Performance up 40%. System errors dropped to near zero. Clients started returning. Nathan called a leadership meeting. He looked across the table at me and said, "You didn't just fix a system. You built a culture." I smiled. "We don't need heroes. We need standards. And people who believe in them." That night, I stood in the server room, my old domain. But nothing in here was mine anymore. And that was the point. The new system didn't depend on me. It depended on the process, the documentation, and the team behind it. No single point of failure. No one irreplaceable. Exactly how it should be. 6 months later, the integrated system between Oryx and Meridian ran like a dream. Clients came back. Downtime dropped to zero. And the chaos that once filled every hallway was replaced by focus, structure, and trust. I sat in my new office, looking out over the server room, when Nathan Wells walked in with a folder under his arm. "The board approved your proposal," he said with a grin. "Our internal technical academy launches next quarter. Full autonomy. Full budget. You get to build it your way." I leaned back, slowly. "This isn't about fancy titles or shiny resumes," I said. "It's about teaching engineers not just how to code, but how to think. How to build things that don't need them around to survive." Nathan nodded. "That's exactly why we trust you to lead it." 3 months later, I stood in front of the Academy's first cohort, 28 new engineers with bright eyes and open minds. I didn't talk about frameworks, or tools, or trends. I talked about mindset, about discipline, about building systems that outlive their creators. I told them, if you ever leave your job and everything breaks, that's not job security. That's failure. One evening after class, a student named Jamie came up to me. "Is it true," he asked, "that people once undervalued you?" I smiled. "More than once. And you still chose to come back and help?" I looked him in the eye. "No, Jamie. I didn't come back for them. I came back for people like you. People who still believe that this work matters." 1 year later, the Oryx Technical Academy became an industry model. Other companies reached out, asking to license the curriculum. Some even offered me speaking tours, advisory roles. I turned most of them down. I wasn't chasing attention. I was building something that would last long after my name was forgotten. On the day of my retirement, I received an email from Caleb. *Felix, just wanted you to know, the system's still running perfectly. The new engineers not only understand your code, they understand why you wrote it the way you did. Thanks for coming back. Not to save us, but to teach us how to save ourselves. I closed my laptop and walked out into the hallway, where a new sign had just been mounted. Felix Carr Technical Learning Center. I stood there for a long moment, not to admire the name, but to make sure that when I walked away, I wasn't leaving a gap. I was leaving a foundation. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new generation of builders who knew how to get it right, from the very first line of code. Sometimes, your value isn't recognized until you're gone. Sometimes, you're not invited back until everything falls apart without you. But the greatest form of revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building something so strong, so lasting, that even those who once underestimated you have no choice but to respect what you created. Felix didn't return to settle the score. He didn't rebuild Meridian to prove anyone wrong. He rebuilt it to prove something much more powerful. That true legacy isn't just about code. It's about people. It's about principles. It's about doing the hard things the right way, even when no one's watching. So if you've ever been overlooked, if you've ever been told you're too expensive, too old, or too stuck in your ways, don't get bitter. Get better. Get back to building. And let the results speak for themselves. If this story resonated with you, like, share, and subscribe. Because we're telling more stories just like this, about people who were underestimated and rose anyway. Drop a comment. Have you ever been a Felix in your own story? Tell us. Someone out there needs to hear it.